A silver platter hit the floor in the royal chamber, and the Felinar cub didn't even flinch. He just stared at it, thin, hollow-eyed, proud enough to die, then looked straight at Ambassador Nora Vance and said, in a voice like sand over glass, "The food is not worthy." For 3 weeks, the diplomatic vessel Celestial Harmony had hung in orbit above Felinar Prime, watching a civilization's future quietly starve itself to death. 5 royal cubs, called the Quintessence, refused every delicacy, every healer, every ritual, every pleading voice. Their physicians found no disease. Their scans showed no toxin. It wasn't biology. It was choice. And the Galactic Council had begun to whisper a word that made even diplomats go cold. Failure. Nora stood on the observation deck, the planet below shimmering like a gemstone under cloudless sun. The world's crystalline forests caught starlight and returned it in violet and amber, beautiful enough to make a person forget there were politics in the universe. Behind her, Captain Reeves approached without footsteps, an old spacer habit that suggested he'd learned to move quietly around people with heavy decisions. "Still no change?" he asked. Nora didn't turn. "None." Reeves exhaled through his nose. "The Council wants to pull us out." "They can want whatever they like," Nora said, voice steady. "I'm not watching children die because the adults ran out of patience." Reeves didn't argue. He rarely did when Nora's stubbornness locked into place. The Felinar had never asked for outside help. Proud, hierarchical, wrapped in tradition like armor. Yet here they were, letting a human into their inner sanctum because desperation made equals of everyone. The cubs weren't merely heirs. They were prophecy. Once every millennium, 5 siblings were born, destined to lead the 5 great houses. Their survival wasn't a family matter. It was the spine of an empire. And that spine was breaking. "Permission to beam down again," Nora said. Reeves lifted an eyebrow. "This will be, what, your 18th trip?" 18th, she confirmed. "The High Command thinks you're intrusive." Nora finally turned, and her expression made Reeves look away first. Not anger, worse. Resolve. "Captain," she said quietly, "if I stop showing up, those cubs learn something. They learn that even the galaxy gives up on them." Reeves' jaw tightened. Then he nodded. "You'll have the beam window." Nora's comm chimed with clearance. She stepped onto the platform, squared her shoulders, and vanished in a lattice of light. The royal chamber of Felinar Prime was a cathedral made of shadow and glow. Bioluminescent crystals grew from the walls like frozen lightning, casting everything in amber and violet. The air held the faint scent of incense and stone, ritual-led over luxury. In the center, on elevated platforms of carved obsidian, lay the 5 cubs. They were 13 cycles old enough to think of themselves as nearly grown. Yet their bodies told another story, ribs under fur, lean limbs, hollowed cheeks. They looked like pride wearing a fragile skin. The largest, Nixar, tracked Nora as she entered. His silver-striped coat was dull and matted from weeks without proper care, but his eyes still burned with something sharp. Not fear. Not sadness. Defiance. The other 4, Vexra, Talais, Cora, and Zephos, barely stirred. At the chamber's edge stood the High Matriarch, Savris, her headdress catching the crystal's glow. The lines around her eyes were deeper than when Nora had first arrived. "You return again," Savris said, voice controlled. "I return until I succeed," Nora replied. A flicker crossed Savris' whiskers, frustration, exhaustion, and something dangerously close to hope. She gestured permission. Nora approached Nixar's platform and lowered herself into a kneel, careful not to invade the cub space. In Felinar culture, closeness had meaning. A single step could be interpreted as pity, dominance, or insult. Nora chose stillness. Up close, Nixar looked worse. But that pride remained, like a blade kept sharp even while the body failed. "Nixar," Nora said softly, "why won't you eat?" She didn't expect an answer. The cubs had been silent for weeks. Nixar answered anyway. "The food is not worthy." The chamber erupted, Hisses, sharp intakes of breath, nobles shifting in outrage. Savris stepped forward, ears flattening. Nixar. Nora lifted one hand without looking away from the cub. A human gesture. Simple. Firm. Let him speak, Nora said. Nixar's gaze locked onto hers. Not worthy. Not because it tasted bad. Not because it was poisoned. Not because it wasn't enough. Not worthy because of what it meant. Nora leaned in a fraction. Explain. Nixar's voice was weak, but his words were clean. We are to be warriors, he said. Leaders. Guardians. His lip curled, tiny, proud, and bitter. They feed us sweet things. Soft things. Delicacies meant for pets and children. A pause, heavy as gravity. We are neither. Silence fell like a curtain. Nora felt the pieces click into place so hard she almost winced. She had studied Felinar biology, culture, politics, ritual, hierarchy, but she had missed the simplest truth. These cubs weren't refusing food. They were refusing the message attached to it. Every platter was saying, stay small, stay harmless, stay cute. Every bite was a reminder, you are still kittens. And for prideful future rulers raised in a warrior culture, that message was unbearable. Nora stood slowly. Savris' voice trembled. We gave them the finest. And it was the wrong kind of finest, Nora said gently. Nixar watched her, eyes narrowed, as if daring her to misunderstand him again. Nora tapped her comm. Captain Reeves. Here, Reeves answered immediately. I need you to send down a case from storage compartment Delta 7. Lock section. A pause. Then Reeves' voice sharpened. Ambassador, those are. I know what they are, Nora cut in. Send them. Savris' whiskers twitched in confusion. What are you doing? Nora met the matriarch's eyes. Treating them the way your culture says they should be treated. 10 minutes later, Nora stood before the Quintessence holding a plain grey case. It looked almost insulting in the middle of all that crystal and ceremony. Nobles muttered. A few looked offended by its lack of ornamentation. Nora flipped the latches and opened it. Inside were sealed packets, hard, rectangular, practical. Human military rations, MREX7. Designed not for celebration, but for survival. 4 marches. 4 cold nights. For long campaigns when food was fuel and the only flavor that mattered was still alive. Nora picked one up, held it where Nixar could see. These, she said, are what human soldiers eat. A ripple moved through the chamber. Confusion, disdain, curiosity. Savris' voice tightened. You bring peasant food before royal heirs. Nora didn't react to the jab. She'd heard worse from council chambers. She tore open a packet. The smell was unimpressive. Processed protein, grain base, minerals. No artistry. No sweetness. No perfume of luxury. Nixar lifted his head. His nostrils flared. Nora saw it, not desire, but recognition. This won't win culinary awards, Nora continued. No one writes songs about it. She looked directly at the 5 platforms. But it keeps our finest alive when they're fighting for something that matters. She set the opened packet on Nixar's platform. It's warrior food, Nora said. Hunter food. March food. Then she said the line she knew would either save them or end her career. Food worthy of those who will lead. The chamber held its breath. Nixar stared at the packet like it was a test. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward and took a bite. For a heartbeat. Nothing happened. Then everything did. Nixar's ears lifted. His eyes sharpened. Not joy. Not comfort. Focus. Vexra's head snapped up. Talai stirred, suddenly alert. Cora sat higher, spine straighter. Zepho's gaze flicked to Nixar's hands, tracking every motion like a trainee watching a commander. Nora's throat tightened. Not because the cubs ate. Because the cubs returned. Nixar swallowed and spoke, voice still weak, but steadier. "This," he said, and the nobles leaned in as if he might declare an omen. "This is acceptable." Nora almost smiled. In Felinar language, that was praise. She kept her voice calm. "Captain Reeves." "Yeah," Reeves said, already guessing. "Send down the entire supply." A shocked hiss ran through the nobles. Savris stepped forward. "Ambassador Nora, you cannot." Nora held up a hand again, softer this time. "Matriarch, if you want them alive, let them eat what makes them feel seen." Nixar ate another bite. Then another. The other 4 cubs watched like they were witnessing a correction in the universe. Then Vexra reached for his own packet. Talais followed. Cora. Zephos. And the royal chamber, filled with crystal and tradition, stood silently while 5 heirs ate plain human combat rations like it was the first true respect they'd been offered in weeks. That night, the Celestial Harmony's mission didn't feel like failure anymore. It felt like a narrow bridge. And Nora had just found the first plank. 2 weeks passed. The Quintessence gained back half their lost weight. Not quickly, healing didn't happen at the speed of pride, but enough that their fur regained sheen, enough that their eyes brightened, enough that their steps stopped wobbling. They refused every delicacy. They ate only the MREX7 packets. Felinar physicians were baffled but relieved. The cubs were not just surviving. They were thriving. In the royal garden, Nora stood beside Savris and watched the Quintessence practice combat forms, slow at first, then smoother day by day. Nixar's movements regained grace. Vexra's footwork sharpened. Talais corrected Zepho's stance with a quiet word. Cora's tail flicked with irritation when she missed a step, then she tried again. Alive. Savris watched them as if she couldn't trust her eyes. "I don't understand," she admitted. "Those packets are plain. Nutritious, yes, but we have far superior." "It was never about nutrition," Nora said gently. "It was about respect." Savris' ears lowered, the way grief sometimes looked in a proud species. "We were feeding them like children." Nora nodded. "You were feeding who they used to be. They needed to know you see who they're becoming." Savris' whiskers trembled. "Humans are strange." Nora smiled faintly. "We know a little about teenagers." "And rebellion," Savris murmured. "And wanting to be taken seriously," Nora added. Nixar approached them with renewed steadiness, then stopped at a respectful distance. He inclined his head, formal, controlled. A gesture between equals. "Ambassador Nora," he said, voice stronger now. "When we lead, we will remember this." He looked past Nora to the sky, where the celestial harmony hung like a silent star. "Humanity will have the friendship of the Quintessence." Nora returned the bow. "And Earth will always have a place at your table," she said, then allowed a small smile, "even if we bring our own food." Nixar's whiskers twitched, almost amusement. "Especially then," he said. Later, as the celestial harmony prepared to depart, Nora filed her final report. The Galactic Council wanted to know what miracle cure humanity had provided. What advanced medical technology? What psychological breakthrough? Nora smiled as she typed. "We gave them memories and treated them like the warriors they will become. Sometimes that's all anyone needs, to be seen for who they truly are." She attached a recommendation. Establish a human Felinar military exchange program. And send more combat rations. Because in a galaxy obsessed with power, the rarest gift wasn't strength. It was recognition. And for 5 starving cubs who refused to be treated like kittens, it was the difference between dying of pride and living with purpose. If you enjoyed this HFY story, hit like and subscribe to HFY Survival Arena for more epic uploads.